Coming up on this episode, I share some positive news about a new baby shark, talk about the learning curve through life and kind of delve into that a little bit, and then finish with a rant about people, I guess, but I'm not too frustrated today, so it's a bit of a light-hearted rant, but let's get into it. What's going on, beautiful people? This is the Perspective Chasing Podcast, and I'm your host, John. On this episode, I want to talk about learning curves, but first, we'll get into the good news. So, as always, it's hard to find truly uplifting, positive news, and admittedly, I've been rushed around this week, so I ain't had too much time to look. But honestly, it is worrying how much positive news is hard to find, or I don't want to use the word suppressed, but it seems like it. Like, if I type something, what's something bad that's happening in the world today, I'd get a million results. But finding something that's positive, that you can truly say is renowned in positivity and just like warm and uplifting, it seems quite hard to find, especially on like a regular reoccurring basis. Like, this is something I'm going to have to look for twice a week. Like a really good story to kind of share and everything else. So it's something that I need to learn and get better with in that, but let me know if you've got any good stories, share them down below and maybe I can look into them and talk about them and everything else, but in my experience they're getting quite hard to find. So anyway, so this one I found about the first ever sighting of a newborn great white shark. We got drone footage off of the coast of Southern California. Is believed to show a newborn great white shark shedding off its embryonic layer, something never witnessed before that might help offer new insights into how sharks spend their first days of life. Now, I didn't go all the way through the story. I'll link it down in the description below if you want to go through all of it, but as always, when it comes to like animals and things like that, I don't think there's any negativity towards it. Anytime anybody hears something about like animals doing well, it should make you feel good. So that's why they seem to be the easiest good news for me to find at the minute. And I like them anyway, it's wholesome. It makes me feel good to know that there's sharks carrying on out there and this, that and everything else. Like, the world needs many things in it. So to hear that there's new life coming into the world and not just life going out of the world is a positivity. Anyway, let's get on to the main topic of learning curves. Now, I'll talk about this originally from the point of view of the podcast, but as always, it will tie into all of life. Like, everything comes down to learning and that. But in terms of the podcast, you can see if you look back over the last 52, well, this is the 53rd episode, you can see over the 6 months how I've been learning in the background, how the podcast has developed, how my approach has developed, how the whole time it's growing, I'm growing, it's developing. And it's not because I've got a textbook here. It's not because I've got an instructor. It really is just me in a room on my own. Like, I am the producer, the host, the editor, this, that, and everything else. But that allows me to learn so many more aspects of it. So, like, the thumbnails are improving over time, in my opinion anyway. Segments in the show will improve over time. The show itself will improve. I'll spend more time on the show and everything else. But it didn't start there, because I didn't have that knowledge in the beginning. And quite frankly, even if I had that knowledge at the beginning, doing that much at once would have been overwhelming. Now, for me to sit down and edit an episode, it's almost second nature. So then I can look to improve on certain parts of it and say, okay, cool, can I add this in? Can I add that in? Or when I'm planning episodes and that, can I do a little bit more due diligence in the planning? Can I can I put a bit more thought into it and things like that. And that's not because I sat there doing all the theory behind the scenes, or I've had some classes or this, that, or whatever else, because quite clearly I haven't. But it's the fact that every week or twice a week I sit down and I do it. I do the work regardless, and you learn through going. It might mean I learn slower. That's fine. I'm cool with that. But I'm learning as I go. Like I said, when I look back myself over the last 6 months, I can see the progression, not just in my mentality, myself, the quality of the episode, but overall, the whole thing seems to be improving, and I'm improving. It makes me want to do more and be better, and like I say, like with the adding in the good news segments and that's a way to remind myself and other people that there are good things going on, because it's so easy to forget that when there's so much negativity and so much worry in the world, and stress and anxiety and this, that and everything else. Like, just hearing a wholehearted or a wholesome story, will warm your heart, literally. But it all comes back to that building it slowly and learning as you go. If I'd have tried to do that from the beginning, I'd have got so overwhelmed, I'd have got confused, this, that and everything else. Like, I still don't like reading out loud to people. Like, it's... In my head, I'll just read it fine and my brain makes sense of it, or everything else. But when you're reading out loud, pronunciation gets in the way of things and everything else. So if you don't pronounce it right or whatever else, you might make yourself look a fool. So there's more kind of anxiety and self-consciousness around reading out loud. It's not something I do often, and obviously I do it more these days because I read to my daughter. But it's something that I never really liked doing. Like, when I was a kid back in school, when it comes round to like you reading your paragraph in class or whatever else, I was the kid that ignored everybody else and like counted through, made sure they knew their paragraph and hoped nobody got skipped over or whatever else, because I memorized this paragraph so I could read it without stuttering, stopping and this, that and everything else. But reality, I never grew out of that. So I'm hoping that and my eyes are terrible, so sometimes it's hard for me to make out the words on a small screen. But anyway. But it's something that I don't want to get in the way of sharing that kind of good news or adding in different parts into the podcast and that. So it's something that I need to learn to just deal with. I'll either keep reading and it'll get easier to read out loud and I'll become more fluid with it over time, or I'll just get more comfortable with the stopping and stuttering and don't care what people think. Either way, it does the job. The story gets shared. It might sometimes be a bit bumpy, but it gets there. The sentiment's there. And at worst, the link will be in the description below, so hey. But it really does come down to that thing of it all starts somewhere. The easiest way for you to start learning is to start doing. No matter what it is, you want to know how to run your own business? Start small. You're going to make mistakes, but learn from them. If you make mistakes and you don't file your taxes properly and you get hit with loads of fines, this, that and everything else, fine, that might be the first year. Learn from it the second year. Don't do that same mistake again. And in time, you'll build that rhythm. You'll build the consistency. You'll learn all of the background parts, and then you can top up and improve on it. If you've learned to manage your finances, and you can literally just manage, so you're not going paycheck to paycheck, you've got a little left over. Then, once you're in a good routine of that, then you can say, cool, I've got an abundance. Now I can start saving and chucking a little bit away for intentional savings, this, that, and everything else. But you won't get there unless you start small. So like I've said before, start small. Start with that A4 piece of paper, but be consistent with it. And within being consistent, you'll learn more, you'll develop, because what you once thought was difficult becomes easy. So then you climatize to it. And the more you climatize, the more you move through these stages, the more you're growing and you're developing. And you won't even realize it until you look back and look at 6 months down the line, a year down the line, 5, 10 years down the line, and you're like, I cannot believe how far I've come. Simply because you climatized it, you learned from everything around you, and you moved forward with it. But it takes awareness. You're not just going to learn for the sake of learning. It takes effort. It's not always going to be easy. Sometimes you're going to have to put in the work when you don't want to. Sometimes you're going to have to drag yourself through. But as long as you're consistent, as long as you show up, you'll get there. That's the whole thing with learning, is you have to have that willingness to be vulnerable and admit that you don't know. If you never admit you don't know something, how are you going to learn anything more? You already know it, so you're not willing to accept it. So you have to have that emptiness in order to gain more knowledge. You have to be willing to admit that you don't know something in order to learn new things, to adopt new understandings. You can't stay with the same ethos forever. And it's always going to be an ebb and flow. So the more that you can learn and be just aware of these situations, be aware that you're still learning, that the book ain't finished yet. Every day is a new page in your book. So that the more you go on and the more that you progress through your journey, the more that you're going to experience, the more that you're going to learn, the more people that you're going to meet. Like you're always going to change over time. So that's why it's a curve. It's not a straight line. Like it's not going to be a continuously uptrend. It's not going to be a continuously downtrend. It's always going to vary. Like I say, riding the wave of life. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. Some lessons are going to be easy to learn, some lessons are going to be hard to learn. But as long as you're willing to learn, as long as you don't shut off to the ideas that there is stuff for you to learn, I don't care how old you are or how much you've been through in life, there is something you can learn from somebody else, either younger or older than yourself. From the opposite end of the spectrum, there are people that will teach you things that you never thought would be possible. That's why people fascinate me. Everybody is unique and different, but yet we all have so much in common. There are so many elements to being a human. So many variables in that we could be 99% similar, but that 1% that we're different could take our lives on a whole new trajectory. So just be willing to be that 1% different. Be willing to learn about yourself and understand that when you go on that journey, it's not always going to be easy and it's not always going to be an upward trend. Sometimes it's going to be hard. Sometimes the lessons are hard. Sometimes the lessons that you need to learn ain't the lessons you want to learn, but they're the lessons that you need. And it's that constant back and forth and stepping outside of yourself and reflecting on things. I can't stress that enough with this, like, just life in general. It's just that constant reassessment of things. Like, life is an experiment. All interactions and everything else, like, the more that you learn from them and experience different situations and outcomes and everything else, eventually you start to understand, and you essentially build like an algorithm. Maybe not algorithm, but you build like an idea or a set of scenarios how things will go, i.e. if you greet somebody in a certain way, their response will be X, Y, or Z. And these then build up your kind of base learning when it comes to like interactions and that. So the more interactions you have, the more chances you have to gain information. And that information can be good or bad. Doesn't really matter. That's down to you to determine. Like, it's just information. So in one person's hands it could be deadly, in other person's hands it could be the saving grace. So it really depends on the person. But to me, it's about gathering that information so that you can learn from it yourself. Do that all throughout life. Learn from as many people as you can. Take on as many life experiences and as many life lessons as you can. Because it's never going to take away from you. It's only going to add to your life, add to your understanding. It might not help you directly, but eventually you might meet somebody else, or somebody that you know might have an experience that insight can help you guide them through. I really don't think there's anything that is... I don't think there's any such thing as bad knowledge. So understanding that learning curve is life. From the moment you're born to the moment you take your last breath, that is a learning curve. That's what we're doing all throughout our lives, is experiencing and learning from our surroundings. Taking in inputs and regurgitating them and interpreting them to others. And that's the beauty of life. Anyway, I'm going to start to wrap this up. I'm going to rant. What do I want to rant about today? I'll rant about people that say they ain't got enough time. Because I know this myself. Like I say, I've got my daughter, I've got a job, I've got the podcast, I've got my own personal life, this, that, and everything else. And things get hectic. Things get out of hand and everything else. But it always comes back to priorities. So we all have the same 24 hours in the day. But we all prioritize them differently. Some people are going to choose to watch telly, scroll on their phone, this, that, and everything else. And some people are going to choose to get stuff done. That is just the bottom line of it. There is no such thing as this person's got more time than I have, da-da-da-da-da-da. They simply use their time better. There's always going to be ups and downs in the radar or whatever else, but there really is no excuse for it, for saying I have absolutely no time. You have time. It's just how you're prioritizing it or how you're using it. So understand that if you're one of those people, you're more than likely always going to be running late or watching the clock and da-da-da-da-da-da. You then become the people that rush around in traffic, cutting people up, squeezing in, creating car accidents, squeezing on buses, squeezing on trains, rushing like there's no tomorrow because you haven't got your things in order. It all starts a domino effect. Again, if you was to be a little bit more prepared, your experience about that whole day would change. So I think all of us need that bit more kind of self-awareness to be like, well, how do my actions affect other people? And like I say, if we all live like that, the world would be a better place. I know that's probably not much of a rant today, but I'm not very wound up. I'm quite exhausted, to be fair. So it will do. The seed for this episode is going to be understand we're all on a journey. We're all still learning things, and there's going to be things that might take you a while to learn. But you only have to worry if you close yourself off to learning. Be willing to learn new things. Be willing to admit that you're wrong. We're all wrong sometimes. So be willing to accept that and be humble. There's so much more to be learned in humility than arrogance. Anyway, on that note, all the best, and I'll catch you on the next one.